All right, it's working. Give it a minute to catch up. I'm going to send out this notification. Hang on a sec.
I just had coffee too, so I should be more cogent than not, which is a good sign. I think that might be a good sign.
All right, here we go. I think we are broadcasting.
I just had coffee too, so I should be more cogent than not.
Oh, if
which is a good sign. I think
someone has their browser window open.
It's a long echo.
Make sure it's not mine.
Someone has their browser window open. I wonder if it's me.
Long echo.
Yeah, it just kind of keeps going.
Make sure it's not mine. Who do we think it is?
Someone has their browser window open. I wonder if it was me the whole time. Sorry about that, guys.
Tell him what he's won, Johnny. Tell him what he's won.
Do you guys love that line? Do you guys love that line from Key and Peele where Megan's on a date with her boyfriend and she's in the restaurant and Megan, who's Jordan Peele, is scolding the waitress and says, "Don't be sorry, be better." Do you remember that? Have you guys seen that? Don't be sorry, be better. Anyway.
Megan.
Yeah, Megan.
Well, guys, it's so good to see you all for our latest episode of Justice Warrior. Diane, how you doing?
I'm doing well, as I told you. I've gone through the existential darkness and emerged in a positive state of mind.
Yeah, and maybe you can share a little bit more about that with our audience
Sure.
momentarily. But today we've got a great show ahead of us. We are going to be shepherded to the integral promised land by our good friend Mark Palmer. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's so good to see you, man. It's so good. I love having you on these calls lately. And Rob McNamara, my old friend, how you doing, buddy?
I'm super excited to be with you all and love to get to jam with Palmer.
Yeah.
We can't wrestle it out, Rob. We can do it virtually. I'll throw you a hook this way, but you'll feel the love, man. You'll feel it. So
I'm always feeling your love.
You always feel it, yeah. Oh,
This is going to be a rich show, guys. This is the fourth episode in a series of discussions that we've been having about race and racism, particularly in America, but really sort of ricocheting around the world. And so, our first few conversations that we had, we talked about this last time. There was a really nice kind of integral arc that we were kind of weaving our way through over the last several episodes. And today we're going to take those conversations just a step deeper. And we're going to be talking about how race is, as Mark, as you say, it's a mutually shared experience. And I think this is going to be a really interesting one because, a lot of the conversations I've been seeing in the integral circles around this issue in the last couple of months have really been sort of, I think caught between this tension that seems to exist between how race is on the one hand an aspect of our own identity. We kind of define ourselves, and race is, an important piece of that identity that we create for ourselves. But then there's the aspect of race that is sort of, socially imposed on us. Our race in a lot of ways comes from how society treats us. And sometimes the way that society treats us doesn't always align with the way that we treat ourselves or the way that we would like to be treated and the way that we self-define. So in that tension, I think.
Let me add one more thing to that. The way society tells us we need to think about race.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's another part of it, is that we're told how we're supposed to conceptualize and think about it. And from one perspective, that's great because it gives us reference points. And from another perspective, we could be in danger of being locked in around a particular kind of duality or differentiation that may or may not serve us.
That's right. Yeah, because we're always in some way internalizing these social pressures, sometimes conforming to them in ways that are totally unconscious to us, sometimes resisting them in ways that are completely at the forefront of our consciousness. And we're always kind of working with this, kind of polarity between how we define ourselves and how society treats us and defines us. And so I think that leads us right into the conversation we're having today, which is how we are sort of enacting all of this together and how all of this, sort of subtly and not so subtly influences the way we treat each other and the way we see each other and the way we value each other. So Mark, I'm really looking forward to this. And before we get started, Diane, are there any opening comments that you wanted to make?
Opening comments. Well, I want to welcome everybody who's on the call, and I hope it's enjoyable and informative, and that it, gives you life force. And I want to thank Mark for being willing to take the lead on it and share his perceptions and let us respond and react in some ways to the conversation he's wanting us to have today.
Yeah.
Thank y'all. I'm going to start with a little story. This will set us right here. So when I was a kid, and if I ever felt something happened to me where I felt wronged or I got involved in something, my mother would sort of let me sort of get it all out, just sort of have at it. And then she'd look at me when I got a little calmer and she'd say, "What do you want to do now?" And that was always impactful for me because the energy in that interaction with her changed for me. It opened something up. And so as I started thinking about this year, the past years, the conversations that we've been having around race, racialization, racial identity, some things started to occur to me. The recent conversations that we've been having, I think, have very much been characterized by looking at the historical analysis, our sort of shared experience of race historically, and coming to terms with that. So there's this process, and we're really awkward in this process right now, right? Expectedly. It's a feeling of victimization on one side, a feeling of sort of being a perpetrator on the other side. And so there's this listening process of coming together and saying, look, this stuff happened and we have to come to terms with it. So let's just call this the first phase of us coming to terms with race in this country as a narrative around listening. That's sort of the goal, listening better, coming to terms with our historical past, with our shared past. And I think that's really been the dominant conversation in terms of, all of us having these conversations about race. But I think there are a number of voices. I think there are other voices that we can invite to the table. I think there are other ways to do discoveries and take on other considerations in this narrative. And as important as I think the listening phase is, that we get better at learning to accept our shared past and our history. And like I said, we're awkward at it now. Hopefully, I think we get better as years go on. We get better at coming to terms with that. But at the same time, is there room, and I think that there is, and I think this is part of this conversation, is there room to start exploring the way forward, a healing process? So where the first phase is characterized by coming to terms with our shared past, how ugly it is, the pink elephant in the room, and learning to listen better on all sides. What can we start to do to move forward? How can we actually start to heal? And I look at this incredibly pragmatically. I kind of tend to think of myself as an experimentalist. I experiment with everything. I'm not a theoretician. I'm not a clinician in any sense of the word. But I do think that the tools that are provided in the human sciences can be very, very useful, particularly when it comes to using our own native experience. So whether that's meditation or psychotherapy or tools around intimacy, we have available to us a lot of technologies that really center around our own experience of the world, and we all share that. So opening this discussion, and this discussion I'm sort of characterizing as, again, a discovery into the healing process. What can we start to do practically? What can we draw on in a way that we all sort of share? And it occurred to me through some exchanges with my esteemed colleagues here that our interpersonal dynamics provide a rich, workable set of experiences for us to start to gain some commonality where we can begin to create spaces, we can create containers. Some of us can step up as stewards and umpires, where we can just even have the conversation in the first place. And again, I'm an experimentalist. I use my own life. I have to have difficult conversations professionally all the time. Well, let's just say I have to have difficult conversations a lot of the time anyway. Maybe some of those are on me, I'm not sure. But the ability to have difficult conversations, I'm drawing from a lot of technologies, from a lot of human science technologies that we have available. And what I see in those is this point of humanization that happens when the difference is let down and there's this synergy of humanization that occurs. And for me, I think, well, why the hell couldn't we use that to create safe spaces to have conversation about race, where it's not just, well, this happened and this happened, and we're not trying to prove or disprove the severity of that, right? Which dominates a lot of conversation. Personally, I'm just not interested in that conversation. I think it's important. I think there are lots of voices that are having it, and hopefully that's working toward better listening. But I also think that what's underrepresented is this process of humanization and honestly practical ways to get there. But we have all these tools available. So again, why the hell not? What do we have to lose? I don't think anything's at stake. Things are as crazy and hectic as they could be, at least seemingly in the public eye. So I'm excited to have this conversation and talk about things like a therapeutic context for having the conversation, the very difficult conversations about how we feel about race. And then taking the attitude of, well, what can we do? What do we have in common? How do we move forward? Asking those questions, again, from the experimentalist point of view. That's sort of, those are my biases. Those are my perspectives around that. So I'll shut up a little bit and allow you all to start playing with that a little bit and kind of get into this conversation in terms of using our personal experience, our interpersonal experiences, and drawing from those commonalities to shape better conversations about race. What do y'all think?
I just want to reflect a couple of things, and then I have some considerations I want to raise with you. So what I'm hearing you say is that you might say the innovation and the learning and the evolution that has gone on in the interiors actually has a lot to teach us about how to do this. And whether it's psychotherapy or transformational containers, or as you said, intimacy skills, or just the number of relationship coaches that so much of what we're talking about actually takes place within the domain of human relationship, and use the language of humanizing one another, actually realizing there's a person on the other side of this, or people on the other side of this that have perspectives and life experience. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And certainly if I draw on my own experience and my own kind of awakenings around my own hidden bias, or these days it's, my own privilege, you might say. And I think that the conversations about systemic racism and what's happening in the here and now, I really still think that what you're talking about has a lot to do with it, because I've said before that, and Ken has reiterated this, that we've done the legislation, that if you look at law and you look at the kind of right-hand quadrants, it's against the law to basically discriminate and treat other people as though they're less than. But all these hidden biases are at work, and these hidden biases affect what we call our institutions and our systems. And how do we actually really, honest to God, help people outgrow us and them? That's just a really massive question for me. So that's what I heard you say, and those are just a couple of things that came up for me while you were talking.
Awesome, Dad. Yeah. And I'll talk. The inner engineer in me is screaming, ooh, what if that is the bias burner, creating a kind of container that we can repeat experimentally as just a way to have a conversation, to become a bias burner.
And even being able to measure the us and them relationship, and how that might transform to a we.
Yes.
Rather than us and them, it's a we.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
really appreciate the invitation to really foreground empathy as sort of the main drive
Yes,
of
that's
how
right, Corey.
we deal with this. Because, you know, I think very often, especially when we're surrounded by headlines that just sort of bypass the frontal lobe and hit us right in the amygdala, our response is often, you know, one of passion. And oftentimes, you know, that passion comes at the expense of genuine empathy.
Or just biological defense.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
self-protection, you know, and all of that, which oftentimes has the effect, the unintended effect of we start pushing each other away. And we're starting to see that in a lot of these conversations, a lot of these sort of super woke conversations trying to sort of wrap their, you know, their heads and their hearts around all of this are, you know, in a lot of ways leading us back towards ideas of segregation and things like that.
Right.
So we're seeing how like this extreme passion that's arising has the, you know, the possible downfall of pushing us farther apart from each other, which is obviously not the direction we want to be
Right.
headed in right now.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you really foregrounding that. And also I appreciate the optimism of your frame, because it really does seem to me, you know, if we sort of look at what's happening around us with one set of lenses, it feels like, God, when have things ever been worse? And on the other hand, whenever I'm walking out of these conversations, I get, you know, it's like I can see sort of a way out here. I can see an escape hatch. I don't know how many of us can see it, but there's an escape.
Right.
Like we're dealing with all the right pressures and all the right contradictions in the midst of having technology like this, where we can have these conversations while quarantined from each other. You know what I mean? While we're being forced to physically separate ourselves from each other, we can still find these technologies and these platforms to convene and to do better and to be better. Which, you know, and it kind of all goes back to your mom's advice. I really love that pivot point between, okay, first tell me everything you're feeling, right? Feel free to unload, and you don't even need to be skillful here. But then that second beat is, okay, now what? And that's where skill comes in. And that's where, you know, that's where mindfulness and skill development and empathy and, you know, finding the right sort of leverage points in society that we can, you know, kind of push on in order to make a greater difference. That's where all of that comes online. That's where all of the work that we've done in growing up and waking up and cleaning up, that spills out into how we show up in all four quadrants and actually, you know, as you say, Diane, help people sort of soften that, you know, that divide between us and them, while also knowing like there's always going to be, that's a developmental reality. There's always going to be people who pass through us, you know, versus them stages of their own identity. The question is, how do we sort of accelerate that process and make it as smooth of a transition towards a more kind of world-centric identity stack?
Yeah, you know, something occurs for me, Corey, that stood out is that we don't have to be very skillful.
Yeah.
There's almost an underlying thing of properly setting expectations. I think it's very easy when we have conversations around sociocultural issues to want to say, well, we need transformation, and it's got to be this giant thing that we can all hold up and say, here's the transformation. And the delta between that and this is like 3 galaxies, right? Like here, right? And so it becomes this impossible thing to get toward.
Yeah.
When really it's the attitude and commitment to just dropping in every moment, dropping. So what if there's the possibility of not aspiring towards, but rather the in the moment practice of just dropping toward a humanizing space of just, I suck at this. Do you suck too? Yeah, we suck at this. It's a drop, whole different change. What should we do? What if we just practice that 4.5 seconds of that and just practice that over and over and getting comfortable with awkwardness, getting comfortable with the lack of quote unquote skillfulness. And we don't all have to be asking and contemplating existential questions in the pursuit of this creating the space of basic safety. It's a basic belongingness container. Like, let's just do that first. Let's just say, hey, this is going to be a hard conversation, everybody. And you can almost audibly, oh my God, I'm so, who else is scared to have this conversation? These are the type of conversations I know my business partner and I are having in organizations. It's like, hey, who's scared to death to have this conversation? I am. I'm going to have more coffee so I can get up the nerve to have, and everyone's just, you know, the laughter. It's like, oh my God, this is the first step of humanization. And it's just getting good at just sucking at that, being okay with that. And that starts to create a container. So yeah, I like that. I like what you said, Corey. It's not having to be so skillful at it. It's a very simple getting at the doorway of a now what moment, not as now what, oh God, but now what, like, well, there's nothing to lose. We already suck.
Right.
Let's walk together. Let's see what it feels like.
I love that.
Yeah,
we already suck.
It's a somatic experience.
Yeah.
We already suck. Let's get comfortable with awkwardness. As a socially anxious type 4, that's like that's my career path right there, buddy.
I can relate.
No, beautifully said, man. Thank you.
Rob, you have any thoughts, any texture as we move around in this sort of starting to come to grips with our lack of skillfulness and be accepting that?
Well, I'm just to kind of mirror, I like kind of these two phases that you're proposing. Like, can we quarantine the listening, the acceptance, the coming to terms, to use your language, to free up, you know, to kind of cleave apart and create more space and concentrated experimentation, which I love that mindset. And the pragmatism. Like, what do we do next? Is like, I can feel our collective ability to kind of drop the historical frame, the historical analysis, and it becomes much more intimate. What do we do with our relationships right here and now? What do we do with this business context? What do we do with this community dilemma? Like,
yes.
And I love that kind of pragmatism. And I'm kind of studying in the background, like, what are we all doing and what are our capabilities that enable us to put like huge, traumatic, like dominating things that people don't get out of.
Yeah.
And they can't get out of them, and maybe they shouldn't get out of them. Like, so there's a readiness, and that's a really interesting question. But I also just really appreciate your leadership and just kind of the sincerity of like, we suck, and you know, like, we just do. I mean, we do this shit, you know, whether we have different racial complexions or not. This is what we suck at this, you know, like across the board. And like, how do, you know, let's try something that's better, you know? So I really appreciate it.
Well, can I say something? I one of the things I'm noticing that so Christina is saying, and I think this is important. She's saying that she feels like the words dropping the historical frame can be triggering for people who feel that
right, that
what was historical is actually going on right now. You know, that we still have a tremendous amount of you know, you could think about racism at every developmental level. You know, we have overt racism in the form of red, and then we have more institutionalized at amber, and then we just have the way in which it kind of runs under the table at orange. And people who are really successful in orange context will, you know, eventually come out and say, for sure, and I just coped with it all this time. And then finally, when people hit green, there's this willingness to sort of bring it forward, which is what makes it difficult in some ways for activists who might be highly pluralistic to engage police departments, which are amber for the most part in terms of their cultural center. Yeah. So the question is, I think what Christina is saying is set aside the historical frame for the moment might be one way to do that. Or not simply the historical frame, but the way in which the legacy of that history is actually at work now. Mm-hmm. And what can we do in this moment, in this conversation, to to actually be able to look at the ways in which it may still be at play, and how do we have a conversation with some sort of acknowledgement that the legacy and the deeply ingrained patterns are still there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a question. But one of the things I was going to say about us is that we're not anxious talking to each other. I'm not anxious talking to you, Mark. I mean,
I'm just riddled with anxiety
all the time.
Rob, you and I talked about this. Still having.
And I'm curious about that, because there are many containers that I walk into to facilitate, some specifically to talk about issues of race and racism, and others because there's a lot of multiculturalism in the room and a lot of differences of opinion about how things should be handled. And then in some ways I get nervous in relationship to how the issue will arise and how I'm going to be able to either be given permission to deal with it or not be given permission to deal with it. But in this container, there's so much natural ease to be able to talk about the ways in which we're affected. I wonder if we also might want to do that a little bit. Like, why are we comfortable with each other?
Well, and it's, another thing, just to kind of pick up on what you were saying, Diane, that I've noticed is that there is, it's one thing to say we need to allow ourselves to be just kind of messy and sloppy and not so skillful, not always get it right, and kind of take that pressure off the conversation. But I'm also aware that there's a lot of social pressure that's being put on people. And maybe this is particularly true for people with complexions that look like mine, to where if you don't get this right, we're going to call you a racist, and and we're going to damage your reputation because you allowed yourself to be messy in public. And so I'm aware that for a lot of people, what they end up choosing is like, well, I'm just not going to engage in the conversation because I'm so afraid of getting something wrong. I don't feel like I have the luxury of just kind of being messy about this and maybe being a little bit confused and saying, you know what I mean? And there's
wait, let's back up for a second there though. What about just a moment of shadow work? Now, you tell me what you guys really honestly think about this, because Rob's always super rigorous. For those of us who are white in these conversations, the accusation of racism, maybe there's just a moment where you say, you know what, you're probably absolutely right. There's probably bias all over the place in my consciousness I'm not seeing. So if there's something happening right here and now, and if it's just simply that we disagree, no. But if you can see something I'm not seeing and bring my attention to it, I'm totally available to that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think that's the invitation, Diane. I think the problem comes when other people assign shadows to you. It's one thing to go through this process and, again, make a subject out of your own object and work with it. However, I think when other people start making objects out of your subject, because it's something you said.
But then we all know that submitting to that projection is always the easiest and best way to deal with it. Like, what part of me in this moment is do you perceive as biased? And again, I'm going to make a distinction between a bias that I literally don't see. And that's one of the agreements that I like to have with my friends, whether it's about gender or whatever it's about. If as a woman, I can say to you guys, as a female right in this moment, we got to slow down. There's something happening that's making me anxious around the gender conversation. Can we just take a minute? And just like you all just did, you're the kind of people that will say, hold it, I'm interested in that. Absolutely. We deal with it for 2 minutes and keep going.
Right.
This is good. This is something that comes up for me in this is that I'm going to liken this to the general context of meditation. Because in meditation, individually, we are dealing with the historical analysis, the roving tape of imagery and sentiment and judgment in the background, always laced by this authoritarian controller energy. Isn't that exactly what happens in our conversations? Everybody's laughing because yes. So with an attitude of inclusivity and experimentally being, what if we in this moment could set all that aside and have conversations where we set ground rules? And again, this is an experimentation. We can't talk about our historical analysis in that context. What if we could only talk about things that we actually relate to together? And again, so that we can energetically and somatically experience we-ness. Because what I see in meditation as an issue, and spirituality in general, I see an issue that I liken to these kinds of conversations. That is that these conversations take place in conceptual ping pong. There's no lived experience in the actual real moment. In the real moment, none of that exists, and people never get a taste of that. We only live through our framing, and so it just becomes a ping pong, and it's just like, and again, this is me as this is me as African American identity coming online when I have a conversation, when I'm having a conversation with someone. It's the last conversation I want to have. The fact that I'm Black.
Because it sucks.
Well, it's just it's interesting, Di. It's not even that it sucks. It's, and again, this is me. What's the goal? Okay, so what's it going to solve? Hey, let's talk about your Black. Well, we could. It's not interesting for me. Let's talk about what moves you, what moves me. And again, that's, everybody can't do that at the same pace. Noted. But that voice still has a place in this conversation, because there are other people that do want to start doing that. And I suspect that those people can be better stewards and umpires as this thing progresses. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's just, I think about meditation, and in meditation, you're not working with the conceptual background. You are aligning in the presencing that is just here now. It's just here now. And I think there's an element of that in conversation, in the space, that is possible. It is the moment of, oh, this is going to be scary, everybody. And everybody laughs. For that 1 millisecond or those 2 seconds or so, we're all just here. And the attributional mind is gone. And we're all fucking free for about 5 seconds, until, naturally our mind goes, well, I know what point I'm about to make next. I'm gonna throw in the research on, what's happened with police, from 1979 to 2010. And oh my God. So it's counterintuitive, I think, and counterinstinctual for us to do this. And it is the moving from the us versus them into a attribute-free zone for milliseconds. I'm not saying we hold people there against their will. It's like, no, you're not allowed to be anybody for this moment. And we trigger the shit out of people. It's just like, hey, we have this availability to us in moments. It's actually what we crave underneath. Let's consider that. Let's have a discovery around that. So I just always think of this, the fact that we're always damned because we're always sort of with this. It's the victim. What is that? The victim perpetrator loop? What's that thing called? Right? We're always in that. We never get to a what now, because it's like,
what is that? The something triangle? What is it?
Yeah, triangle.
Drama triangle.
Drama triangle. Yeah, there it is. Yes. Drama triangle. Yeah. Another beautiful thing that I was like, okay, again, is there space to just not have those attributes for the moment?
For sure. This is where I disagree with Kendi a little bit. He says there's no such thing as non-racism. And what I think is he must not be a meditator. When I hear him say there's only racism and anti-racism, I'm like, then he hasn't sat still for long periods of time.
Right.
Because he wouldn't say that if that weren't the case. And I do think that what you're describing is, can we create an environment of non-racism? And actually, because I feel, Mark, like I want to be able to talk about my cultural inheritance, and I want to be able to acknowledge the power of the genuine power of the Black, not only story, experience, art, spirituality. Like I really want to honor the relative part of you too. And I want us to have a great conversation as opposed to a boring one in which we're just repeating accusations and a narrative about history that's only one dimensional, that's all about oppression and injury, but doesn't talk about resilience, doesn't talk about spiritual depth, doesn't talk about the heroic quality of overcoming struggle. I mean, that stuff is important. So I want to sit with you in this empty field And then I want us to be able to talk about how you experience me as Irish and why I have such a bad temper. Or the relationship of Irish spirituality to Black spirituality, you know?
Yeah.
There's something really deep there. So anyway, sorry guys, I'm getting excited. So
no, this is good. Good. Okay. Mission accomplished. I love that, because I think from this consent toward this openness, presence, position, we can have this deep appreciation and exploration, because there is the safety of being humanized, aligned together in this humanization, so that we can now freely, without attribute, appreciate all the attributes. This paradox that we can take. And again, I'm using my own experience. I'm not a theoretician, although I find theory useful in describing my experiences. And I feel like I have these moments all the time. And I draw from that. I learn from that. I learn what creates humanization. Look, I have to do this shit every day for my job, right? I can't come in and be just a Black guy for my job. I can't, right? I talk to people that grew up in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and have seen exactly one Black person in 20 years. And I have to dynamically relate to that person. And I think it's a beautiful process to do that. And I'm not saying everybody can do it. Again, I'm relating my experience because I think this particular voice of the narrative is important. And it's important for people to understand that these other voices exist. And it doesn't compromise the ugly past or the struggle to accept what's happened. But it does open up the complementarity of voices of starting to pave the way to move forward. So, yeah. So I love the fact that this stuff is available because we're doing it all the time anyway. I'm doing this shit all the time anyway. I think you all are too. And not just around race, around gender and around class and, you know, all the other us versus thems that I think we can name that sort of, you know, comprise the human duplicity making machine of how our psyches work. But we're navigating that all the time anyway. And sometimes we do it poorly, sometimes we do it superbly. And I think there's an opportunity to learn from that and bring that to this type of conversation. There's almost a mystique, a weird mystique about the racialization or the race conversation too, that sometimes can be a barrier, that somehow it is different than the us versus them energetically. Let's say energetically and somatically. And obviously there are nuances and there are particularities about it because it's our society, it's our culture, it's our history, it's what we're dealing with. But at an energetic level, another way of slicing this up, it's not so different in my experience. And again, I'll speak for myself. I don't feel like it's so different than a lot of us versus them that may initially characterize two people or a number of people coming together. And there's an opportunity to leap beyond that and have a conversation where then all of a sudden we can appreciate these other things about ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think if we learn to hold this conversation again beyond this shared history, not to exclude it, but also to inclusively look at it somatically, how the energy of it in the moment, and be able to connect the fact that that energy is similar to these other us versus them patterns that are out there, and that how we are always trying to, I think natively, almost unconsciously, go beyond that. Again, sometimes we do it well, sometimes we don't, but I think our impulse is to do it. Our impulse is, I think, to get beyond that and to connect, to get to a level of belongingness.
It's gorgeous, Mark. I'm reminded of how Ken so elegantly sort of describes, you know, just the anatomy of the moment, right? Where every moment comes with an aspect of karma, and every moment comes with an opportunity for creativity. Every moment. So there's a historical context to every moment. Yes. And in every moment, that context is dropped so that genuine emergence, genuine creative novelty can come through. And that only comes through when these historical contexts are dropped. And again, this is this is like the engine of evolution that's carrying us from moment to moment. And what I hear you saying, Mark, is that like, look, the problem and the challenges of race and racism, this is clearly, it's not just a 4-quadrant problem, it's an 8-zone problem, right?
That's right.
And there are particular practices and injunctions that we can do within.
Oh my God.
Within
oh my God. What have we just started talking about?
Well, I want to name the fact that Mark, I think what you're doing
What
is
it? What's it called? This is integral what?
Methodological pluralism.
Methodological. I'm just super scared. I can't handle this many. I can't handle this many dimensions. Okay, go ahead, Corey. I'm just going to strap in.
The only point I'm trying to make is that if you're doing an integral practice, that doesn't mean you need to be practicing all quadrants, all zones, all stages, you don't need to be doing this simultaneously. Like there's one totalizing practice for all of this. I think, Mark, what you're leading us to is a particular type of injunction which needs to be added to all of these other practices that are also taking place around us.
That's right. That's right.
And in order to do so, you don't need to bring in all of it. You can just like, no, let's just look at this zone. Let's just kind of drop into this together. And then we can, relate to these other practices from that point of view.
Yeah.
Let's look at differences from the point of view of our sameness, right? It's
an invitation.
Yeah.
It's an invitation. And, come to the party or not, but the door's open.
Right.
The doors come to the party or not, the door's open.
I mean, there's nothing at stake in my perspective. Like, what the hell do we have to lose? Right. We're all,
people in the chat are saying, I want to come to the party. I want to come to the party.
The door is open.
These days, we've even
got punch. We've got punch. You don't even have to bring your own bottle. You can if you want.
Although I remember once you and I drank together, Mark, and we got in trouble. You remember? Way back a long time ago.
I have no memory of that.
That's why you got in trouble.
That was a long time ago.
Great times. Great times.
No historical context here.
That's right.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
That's right. Nothing to look at here. Do y'all want to open it up? I see some great chat going on.
Let me read this comment that Lewis just posted. So he says, a quote by Nelson Mandela: "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world," unquote. I appreciated what Mark's mom shared when there was something that occurred with Mark. If I'm correct, what would you like to do now? Thus, what can be done? Or we might say, what is ours to do? Words in communication can have an effect with people. I believe the word racism can have an adverse effect. What Diane said, hidden biases in effect. The big question to anyone in the environment who exhibits biases is, why do you feel this way? Thank you. This communication is open and a good feeling.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Lewis.
Yeah, there have been some really great comments. So we've had some nice back and forth with Melissa and Angelica, and also someone whose name starts Christina. Yeah, there's some great stuff in there.
So let me just say the spiel real quick. If you have any questions or comments and want to talk with us in real time, 2 ways to go about it. Either press the raise my hand button, which lets us know that you want us to turn on your video feed and we can have some, again, real time back and forth. Or you can submit a written question through the Q&A and we'll just read that on air and answer it that way. So 2 different ways of interacting. I'm also watching the live YouTube stream right now. So if anyone posts comments on the YouTube page, I can read those in the show right now. And we do have a hand raised. Michael, I'm bringing you on over.
Come on down, Michael.
Red Rover, Red Rover. And let's get you unmuted. Michael, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I love this conversation, and I love Mark's anecdote with his mother, but I really resonate about letting ourselves be unskillful and being awkward to move through this, because I grew up with a speech impediment when I was a teenager, and it has affected me all my life of trying to speak up for myself or articulate in the act of humanizing myself and being and acknowledging the other person. And that's one thing I find that I've had to really exercise a lot of practice when I am involved with people that don't want to accept a sort of unskillfulness of trying to talk about things and creating that space. I've had incidents in the last week about that, but fortunately, like you say, Mark, I think I look at conversation as an enactment of meditation in the here and now.
Yeah.
And so I just want to bring forward that I really appreciate this conversation because I think it makes it more real from my point of view.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I
sincerely.
appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said about just what you've worked with in terms of your speech and just how easily it was for me to receive your message just now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and just to mention, Michael, as soon as you mentioned that, my heart kind of opened because my daughter is 7 years old and she's dealing with a speech impediment right now, one of her many challenges. So it's inspiring for me to see you here today and to see you show up as you did. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah.
All right. So we have another
on a few threads that are kind of percolating over here.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Rob. And there are a couple of things in the chat I want to respond to in a minute, but go ahead, Rob. So chat people, we'll be to you in a sec. Go ahead. I want to listen.
Yeah. So I'm still with Mark in your kind of experimentalist frame, in your kind of call for humanization, which I just love. There's something that I feel that's present here that for us to participate with, to become more fully human is in some ways to kind of relax and settle into our incompleteness, our flaws, our shortcomings. There's kind of a warmth and kindness to it. Yeah. And then Mark, you're saying like the party doors are open and like there's a party in here. Like, and those images are like profound. And then what we're welcoming, I think, is really profound. And I can feel the part of me that's super structured, that has to be not just good, but like excellent.
Yeah.
And that protective rigor that's also like really trying to do good in the world. And that like the construction of order pushes disorder outside, and there's a way that like that I think the function of racism is to create a coherent order that pushes the disorder and kind of the dehumanization and the kind of like lack of resources and the, all kinds of gnarly stuff gets pushed off to others.
Yeah.
And like, I just feel like there's some, like we're being experimented on right now in terms of how we're kind of jovial and playful and warm, and to your point, like there's not a whole lot of anxiety and it's like, they come on into the party. Let's see how we can like make some mistakes, forgive each other, get upset, get hurt, have a big opening, and then like ask some pragmatic questions and maybe actually do something different together, and maybe not cogitate. Like I'm actually doing something different with you or us, So those are the things.
And I would say I would include in what you're describing, Rob, approaching our anxiety points. There are things I could say in this conversation right now that would create anxiety immediately in all of us. And if we were sitting at dinner having a drink together, I would say those things, right? But online, I'm much less reticent to say them. So I think included in that is approaching anxiety and allowing ourselves to expand into the anxiety, into the fear, into the anger, into the impulse to dominate each other, one up, one down.
Yeah.
You know, because that's we have to learn how to occupy all that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, to that point, Di, and to what you're talking about, Rob, the reason I like the party analogy, and yes, Rob, you are being experimented on, you know, very astute observation. I'm experimenting on all of you. You just thought the Triscuits were out just because I had a bowl of Triscuits out, but this is a party. But the invitation and the context of a party allows some part of us, I think, a very somatically extending part of us to come out and touch each other, even virtually. Mm. And what I often find in conversations, why I like parties versus any other forum, is that people touch each other. So I'm an Ohio State fan, and I would go to these Ohio State parties when there's football in the fall and get into these really big disagreements. And, you know, just sort of grab someone on the shoulder, like, dude, you are full of shit. There's no way that Michigan can beat us. It's received differently because I've got my arm around this guy's neck and he's smiling and his beer is going all over the place and he's laughing and everyone else there's laughter and there's touch and there's feel. And so part of the humanization process is somewhere around this somatic, energetic component that is often left out of these conversations. Again, this is such a conceptually driven conversation. Yeah. It's fucking serious, right? We can't possibly hope to humanize it without creating some way for the somatic, energetic piece to come in, even virtually. And one way to do that is to sort of align us to party energy so that we can at least start to have that, because none of us can let down enough so that the gnarlier stuff can come in. If these other things come online, to use a phrase Corey used earlier, if some of the somatic, energetic stuff is included in this as a component of the conversation, then the buoyancy can be there. Even in very real, shitty stuff, the buoyancy can be there. And that buoyancy is absolutely necessary in my view. You can't really have an impactful conversation toward healing without that buoyancy caused by also finding ways to include that somatic, energetic piece to come in. It's an essential part of human experience. Yeah. You can't have a conversation without that in some way, which is why I like.
I'm so relieved.
Well,
I haven't had any parties for so long.
I know it's been.
I really need them.
And Gilmore says, if we're having a party, I hope there will be some singing and dancing. And it just reminds me of that line, a revolution without dancing is not a revolution worth having.
There you go.
From V for Vendetta. And I do love this. And also, I mean, this is, I just want to mention, this kind of aligns with some of the major moves that we've been making these days with Integral Life in general, which, as people who've been here for a while know, Integral tends to be a really heady and cognitive kind of space for us to play in. And oftentimes when we're having these conversations, that somatic piece does get dropped out because it's just sort of like, well, here's my conceptions of rubbing against your conceptions and let's, sort of ideate way out of this. Right. And we don't get the dancing very often. We don't get that somatic sort of energetic exchange with each other. And what I love about this conversation is how it actually aligns with something we're doing with Integral Life right now, where we're beginning to actually bring in this real-time practice piece for Integral Life members, where every week we're going to be doing real shared experience, real-time practices with other people in the community, sort of led by people within the community. So it's kind of a for you, by you practice space. But I think this is vitally important for our ongoing integral maturity in general, because it reminds us that if this is not a practice-based conversation,
that's right.
It might not be a conversation really worth or at the very least, it might not be a conversation that's going to end up very fruitful. But the minute we can enter into this kind of practiced container with each other where
Right.
all of this is invited. And again, where we can be vulnerable without judgment there, because it is a space that is, has guardrails around it. It is a quote unquote safe, integral space for you to be yourself with others and to really, again, just experience each other and how we co-create ourselves with each other is absolutely precious. And I think that this conversation is leading us towards that kind of practice-based relationship that we can have with each other, and that hopefully we can begin role modeling for everyone else that just happens to be standing in our own sphere of influence.
Damn right. Parties everywhere.
Parties everywhere.
Yeah.
So Randy's saying, let's do it. I think she means now. We better bring Randy in. Bring her on in, guys. Let's see. She sounds like she wants to party. Let's get her in here.
I'm about 10 steps away from a bottle of bourbon, so I can bring that in.
So if Randy, if you want to join the conversation, raise your hand.
Come on in, Rand.
There we go. And then we've got Race lined up after that. So Race, we'll get to you soon.
All right. Cool.
I love it. There she is. There's Levine right there.
Let's get you unmuted.
Unmuted there. Unmute. Oh, still muted.
You just remuted. Let's try that again.
You remuted, Levine.
I think we're having the thing where like someone opens the car lock at the exact same time. They lift the handle.
No. Mark closed the doors to the parties. So
there you go.
There we go.
Wanted. I knew it.
She's not wanted at the party.
Not true.
You're always wanted.
Let's do it, right?
Yeah,
let's do it.
I'm a nervous wreck right now. What's great about a party is the bourbon, right? Altered state, relaxation.
Here, Randy, here's a joke. Okay, ready? What's this, Randy? What's this?
A wave.
I don't know, but it's going the other way. That was my opening party bit. Okay, go ahead, Rand.
Well, I appreciate being here. As I said, I'm not a regular to this bar, so I feel really nervous, and I thought I would bring that in to be real and bring the experience into the moment.
Yeah, come on in. Come on in.
Thank you. You really? I do have a question. Can I ask my question now that I'm in?
Yeah.
Here's my question. What from an integral perspective or this moment perspective? From a this moment perspective, like how do we create that kind of environment where I feel like I can make a mess and be drunk and fucked up and make mistakes, and I'm probably already doing it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I feel there are things you're already doing that are very comforting to me. So that's a good thing. That's
what this party is all about. You're a natural fit, Randy. You're a natural fit.
There you go.
We got to have parties. I mean, that's the only way to do it. We got to have parties. I mean, the whole point of a party is to let down, right? So none of us.
Well, you telling me that I'm a natural fit helps me let down.
You're where you're supposed to be.
You are where you're supposed to be. This is what this experiment is. This is what I think the potential of this kind of container is. I think things happen in this kind of container. I really, really do. And things, the dynamic of, allowing so much to just be what we are. We can hold each other. We can laugh with each other. Everybody can laugh at me. I don't give a shit. I feel it as love. It's love, right? It feels good. It feels good for me. So everything is allowed. And I think we can experiment with that. We can hold each other in that. Yeah, I think that's why it feels so good. How can we model this? Start with calling the container a party. And we're not allowed to talk about work unless it's a funny story involving work. So humor is a big piece of this. And laughter is a big piece of this.
Hey, what's this?
I don't know, but it's going the
other way. You got some nice, colorful stuff coming out of the back of your head.
Yeah. My party outfit. Anyway, I don't need to take more space. I just wanted to, I like what everybody's saying about trying to bring into the moment. Whatever it is we're talking about. So I made a little attempt.
We love
and I appreciate the love and the it's very inviting and welcoming to know that I'm a natural fit or I'm where I'm supposed to be and all that stuff. That's all great. Thank you.
Plus, look at Mark. Look how he is up in the camera. He's like crawling out of his camera to meet you.
Although whoever said on the text, my hair looks like shit and I'm in my pajamas, didn't want our video on. I was like, me too. And look, here I am. I would dress up for the next party.
Get some lipstick. Where is it?
I won't, lipstick? But you know, it's okay. Everybody do your thing. I love it.
It's better not to dress up. I hear you.
Right.
Anyway, get me. I'm done. Bye.
Bye, Kitty.
You're good. Thank you. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
That was a.
Oh, I cut her off right in the middle of a sentence. Sorry about that, Randy. No, I love that point. And I always love it when people come to these shows and be like, look, it's hard to show up on shows like this and to be in public. And, I get that. I mean, when I started doing these shows, I was absolutely just terrified. I still am in a lot of ways, but I was constantly terrified because I feel like there's this kind of unspoken pressure in Integral Land in particular, where it's like, we all need to be so practiced and integrated, and you know what I mean, these radical ascenders who have all of our shit in order all the time, and it's like, guys, my shit is not in order.
Yeah, who are those guys anyway?
I don't know where they are either, but like everyone thinks they are one, everyone thinks the integral community is kind of populated by them. So like my response to that is like, I'm just going to be as vulnerable as I know how to be while doing these shows. If I'm feeling anxious, I'm going to tell you guys, I'm feeling mad anxious right now.
I love it.
If I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I'm going to let you know, guys, I kind of feel like I'm out of my depth here, which I feel, by the way, every single time, particularly in this show with you guys. But there's this familiarity, this, as you say, Mark, this getting comfortable with awkwardness that becomes the work itself. And you really do start feeling like, oh, next time I slip into this, it's there's a little bit less friction, right? Yes. I can be a little bit more of myself each time I take that step sort of into my own vulnerability and my own authenticity, and finding a strength, that's kind of waiting for me within both of those things.
While you party.
While we're partying,
exactly.
I mean, there's the trust in all this, right? Look, our being is natively intelligent. If we get exposed to this feeling, right, it looks for that the next time. Ooh, right. I know what that looks like. It templates on that, right? And that's how it's created, body by body. At the next party, we look for that, and we gravitate toward that. We open up so that others can open up into that. It's almost just trusting and kind of getting out of the way. That's sort of what I meant earlier about. It's just a commitment to dropping.
I have a party issue.
I'm ready to
party. Not enough cups. And
Scotch
I need help. I want to have fun with this. I'm ready, but you have to help me. And maybe there are other women on the audience who feel this way too. I get my feelings hurt when I'm called a Karen or a Becky or whatever. As a white woman, I still feel like, God damn it, why do I still feel sort of down on the totem pole? Like, I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
Help me, guys, at the party. Woo. Help me.
I'll tell you, there are conversations I actually will never use. There are certain words that I've just made a just sort of baseline commitment that I won't use in conversation. Again, I'm a pragmatist, right? I'm a pragmatist. So when I bring those words with those gravity, with the level of gravity in the conversation, I have to ask myself, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your goal? What's your end game in this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. If my end game is to create party, is to create connectiveness and connectedness. I know what the fuck I'm doing if I use Karen or fragility or some other bullshit. I'm tickling the shared guilt, and it's back to the drama triangle. So those aren't useful for me. Those just aren't useful. I mean, there are a lot of words in the narrative to me that are just like, why the hell would you? Like, I can understand it in an academic setting among academics to try to better understand. And then you have a conversation where you Trojan horse things, but you don't actually use those terms. So I just don't find them practically useful in having a conversation. They fuck the party up. Now there's a fight. Now we've got to stop the party. So I don't like those words either.
But maybe, I mean, Randy is saying, why don't I like them? And maybe what I should say is, because I find it a form of stereotyping, and maybe it's okay. Like, maybe I should be okay with stereotyping, and maybe I should just allow myself to be stereotyped. But that sense that automatically, because I'm white, I feel entitled.
Well, and this is kind of, my question for you, Diane, is
I don't mind being challenged around it.
Is what you're experiencing right now different from what I was saying earlier when I said, as a white guy, there can be a lot of pressure to be super skillful about this all the time, because the last thing I want is anyone to call me a racist. Your response to that is like, well, maybe you're a racist.
Maybe I'm a Karen.
Maybe there's a shadow. There's an opportunity for some shadow there, and it was kind of just like, well, just kind of deal with it in a certain.
Okay. All right, I can do that. I can go down that road. Somebody says they want Karen to come to the party. Okay.
Yeah, Karen can come to the party.
All right, Becky, if you'll come, I'll come.
I told you, everybody's allowed.
Hey, Becky.
Everybody's invited here. Everybody's invited.
All right, great. I'm in. Fair enough. I got my cell phone ready to report you guys any second. Any second you cross me, I'm calling people. Becky's coming.
Yeah, Becky's coming too.
All right, yeah.
We're going to do shots. We're all going to do shots.
I'm going to bring Reese on
over.
The
dogs, they came in when you said everybody's invited. They came in. Yeah, they all showed up. Okay, that was helpful, guys. That helped me a lot.
I'm going to jump on something on there too that's just interesting to me. The reason why I don't like those words in general, and again, I'm going to bring it back to the somatic experience thing, right? I'm not going to bring in the historical analysis shit. So I'm going to cut that wall off. And then I'm going to talk about what those words evoke, again, somatically and energetically. And I think somatically and energetically, we get out of the space of discovery. What can we do together? And back into this shit. If we just frame that energetically and somatically, what it does feel ick. Right? It's not accepting, oh, maybe I am that. And it's something, no. It's just like, now we're back in the fucking triangle.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So this responds to Corey, because Corey was saying when I suggested to him, maybe he just assumed that we were sort of more in the serious place. We weren't in this more relaxed, playful place. Got it.
That's okay. Sometimes we wander outside, we walk in the street, we get on our cell phone, and I come out and I say, go come back to the party. Here's your cup. Here's your ice. And no, you wanted no ice, straight up. And then you come back in the party.
I get lost at parties all the time, so it's.
Rob, what about you? What about you at this party?
Well, I'm just noticing, I think Corey and I met at a party that I threw.
Yep.
And
Mark and I met at a party, I think.
Yeah, Mark.
We bonded.
We bonded. Actually came together, and this is the thing that we still do it. Like, we train like very seriously.
Hard. Yeah.
We train really hard, and then we like that serious rigor and training shifts into like, let's party, let's celebrate, and like the diversities come out on display, and we always do this on retreat. It's like black all week, sitting on cushions, quiet, like, it's just very like monotone, like on the Zen side of the street. And then it's like total color,
disco
like,
ball
embrace. And it's very similar in terms of like integral life practice. We launched those seminars. It was like we're going to train the living hell out of your psyche, your shadow, you know,
right.
spiritual practice. I've got like resistance bands in the front of the room, like, let's get the body going. and you know, we're doing integral practice, tremendous rigor, and then we party, you know, like we do, like, so, I mean, Brett Thomas and I are still talking
about right.
last week, like, about the parties that we threw together.
Epic, you know? Epic. I mean, you know, Rob, you bring up something for me. It's like, if you look at the whole of humanity, the only container where we don't completely fuck things up in terms of getting along is celebration. That's like our one thing that we can kind of do that well as a species. Everything else, we just, you know, everything else is, you know, sort of a complete awkward mess, and not in a good way. But the one thing that we all, if we can pull it off, that we do actually experience some level of, you know, dynamic inclusivity, whatever words you want to experience together. We experience it's when we celebrate. It's the only thing we get right. It's the only time we let down differences enough where our bodies and our hearts can template the sensation, the sensory experience of we-ness, togetherness.
Well, Mark, let me ask you something, because I think some people would say that sports is another place, which is why they resisted the whole taking anything in that arena. What do you feel about that? You know, because it's stylized competition, and everybody knows it's there for high performance and fun and competition. And that's why I think the resistance to taking the knee was so strong from some people. And, you know, now LeBron and the NBA and NHL and a lot of baseball, you know. So what do you think about that? I'm just curious to your perspective on it.
Sports is interesting because as a sports fan, I'm wondering if sports now is really a celebratory venue in the way that I'm envisioning here, because sports, because of the professional level of it, because of the seriousness of it,
and the money.
We sort of tainted it, so it's become a lot of other things now. I think we like to think that, look, we get to act out a lot of base sort of, you know, types of energies in the sporting arena, so it is very important. But I'm not sure, only in fleeting moments when a certain group of people's team wins a really big game, I've seen these punctuated moments. Do we have real celebration in the sense of we experience a kind of we-ness that transcends a lot of this other stuff, the type of we-ness that allows, what did Cedric the Entertainer say? I love you, Steve, in a Brian Piccolo, who was the quarterback? I can't remember. In a sports way. It's just in that moment of winning, we have that kind of celebration thing. But outside of that,
who was that Brian Piccolo? Wasn't there a book? There was a really famous book or something.
I can't remember. Bears thing. I can't. My memory's gone. But,
okay, all right. We're in a bar. We're partying. We're drunk. We can't remember who it was, but we know it was important at one time. Anyway. Oh, who gives a shit about the historical frame? Anyway.
in that moment, and I've been there. So like when the Cavs won, it came back against Golden State. Unthinkable. They were down 3-1 in the series, and they won the next few games. And people were losing their shit. They were losing their minds. And you know, everybody's in bars and people are going up and they win. It's the most unthinkable win ever. Freaking like 2 million people around Cleveland, Ohio in in sort of this uniform celebration. And
Brian's song.
Anything could happen.
Brian's song.
Yes.
Nice. They brought it in, they put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Gail Sayers, Brian Piccolo. They had that bro love. That's it. Just
that's right. Yeah.
Right. So sports is like these punctuated moments. That's the Bears. That's right. The Bears. So in that kind of those punctuated moments in sports, but they're far and few between. But I think that's why sports in general have been sort of, have had controversialness, because it's only in those moments of, we fucking won, it doesn't matter, where there's the letdown.
I gotcha.
Then it's serious again. That's my take on it.
Okay. What do you think, Rob?
Well, I'm just thinking of like the ease that we have. I do think the fact that we've played, like just genuinely played together, but we've also like genuinely peered into, what matters most in the kind of deepest sobriety. And that polarity seems to be some recipe for us actually becoming more human together. Like to really pick up and to be moved and to grieve and to love and to fight for like what matters most, and then to like, Mark, to your point, just to totally let down. And I keep thinking, Di, just in terms of like how you've trained me just around sameness and difference, and it, like, I see you doing it in parties too, like how do we create a coherent opening and a coherent close so that it, because you can fuck up parties easy and people can feel like this isn't their party, like there's all kinds of ways that we ostracize and people are on the outside and they don't know how to find their way in. And what are the ways that some
people don't know how to party very well, and they want to know how, and they just they didn't ever grow up around it and didn't know how to let down on that level. Don't know how to play. Corey's saying he feels that way a little bit.
100%.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I just remember a few of your DJing evenings. I thought you were pretty good at it.
That's why I became a DJ, Diane, so that I could be in the party, sort of an important role of the party, without having to talk to a single other person.
I see.
But I could still be felt and known and seen and all that. That was my coping mechanism. And Rob, I just want to piggyback on what you were saying, going from sort of a week of blackness to like the disco ball. I've always noticed that like no one parties harder than like the most staunch, disciplined meditators. It's, like they're the ones who always like let their hair, well, when you have hair to let down, Rob, this doesn't apply to you, but they're the ones who end up like not wearing pants with a lampshade on their head because they just spent the
I'm here for it. And I'm here for all of it.
We all know how to party. It's true.
Well, some people don't, and they get super awkward, and it brings up experiences of grade school, of feeling left out, or like a wallflower, even just being able to dance, or sometimes one of the things I think that we learned in throwing parties at the Integral Institute was that having a strong container with a strong beginning, middle, and end, having playlists that include everybody, and kind of Motown on one end and then rap at the other end, and kind of leading people through to where they could participate with the whole thing, and even structuring some parts of it so that people had ways to enter. Sometimes people have to be taught how to let down.
Absolutely, Diane, and everything you all are saying, and I know for myself, I'm a natural partier, and so I get enlivened by being a steward of the party and allowing people to come into that party however they need to come in. Some of us need to talk about, maybe let down a couple stories about work. Well, this is what I'm doing. This is kind of what I've been doing. Like, that's the beginning of their letdown. Somebody else is going to dive face first into the punch bowl and go bobbing for the, for the fruit. Hey, we'll make room for that too.
And we have to also, and it'd be fun to bring more people in, but I think right now is a good moment to say there could be people who would watch this conversation and say, oh yeah, great for you guys to say, look how comfortable you are in life. It wasn't in your community that somebody just got shot 7 times in the back as he tried to get in his car. Like, how do we address that person when they come in the door?
Right.
Do they?
And again, if I need a moment outside, I leave the party. Right. Because the party has intention, and it's a matter of aligning ourselves with the intention of the party or not when it becomes more skillful to take ourselves out of that. And there's an invitation. That's why the door stays open, right? So that we can come in and out as needed.
So I don't know how long you want to stay on, Rob, Mark, but so Christina's saying when I said that thing about we're all having a good time, but there's still people who don't have adequate housing. Police are still shooting Black people. And she's saying she was sort of feeling that way. And then somebody else said, Mark says, it isn't a real party if it doesn't follow transformation. So I heard you say that you go outside, that you take a moment when you
do. And again, my invitation personally is that I've only been able to have difficult conversations when I've been able to create levity where people can actually come together to begin to accept the gravity of it. So the intention of the party is to drop us into a place where we can start to really compellingly accept the gravity of our situation together and move forward in a meaningful way. I just find without that buoyancy, no conversation is possible. So it does seem counterinstinctual. It seems counterintuitive. But our conditioning is to be entrenched. And so it's only, in my experience, people tell some of their deepest, darkest shit at a party in a room where they've had three drinks.
Yep.
And all the shit comes out and someone's holding their head in their face. And it might be the first time in 10 years they felt safe. That's the kind of shit that happens at a party. So I think it's that type of container to bring people to drop into that, because we can't begin that. Look, we're not having the conversation anyway, folks.
That's true.
No,
we're not.
We're not having it. Again, there's nothing at stake. And again, that's an invitation to consider. I'm not making that as fact. That's my experience, but I invite everybody to consider it, because it's only when we can deeply touch each other and begin to enact and invoke a sense of somatic, energetic coming together, not just that we align conceptually. We're not in the moment. We're not in present experience when we're doing that. So we have to get light to get heavy, to drop down, to be able to have the capacity to get heavy. And my experience is just a constant confirmation of that and exercise of that. And again, not as fact, but it's just a constant experimentation with myself. So I invite people to that party.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a funeral and you can have a wake, right? I mean, you can have a place to mourn, and then you can have a place to celebrate with it, even while you're still mourning. And if you have to go to the funeral home before you come to the party, then that's what you do. Yeah. Right. But I hope you still make it to the party.
So here's a couple things from the chat that, so Christina and Michael are saying, so how, Mark, given your experience as a facilitator and a trainer, and Randy's making the point that good facilitation is like alcohol. You have a good facilitator, the alcohol can flow and help people relax a little bit. So Mike and Christina want to know, how would you set up a safe space for public officials if you watch the mayor get shouted down in Wisconsin or Portland, or the police? How do you set up a safe space for public officials with people who are telling them that they're inherently biased and are basically wrong and bad? How would you do that? Yeah. How would you go about having the mayor, the city, and the law enforcement with activists? Could you do that, do you think? Could you create this vibe with that group of people?
I think so. The way I look at this is that it's a party where you're not allowed to wear the clothes that you brought in. Everybody's got to put on a kimono. And the kimono is free of the clothing of identity that we carry into the space. I think it's possible to create spaces. I've certainly facilitated spaces where with each other, we consent that we'll either take collectively a unified identity or just come in with none in that moment. And again, we talked about how it can be triggering for some people. But again, it's for this moment, are we able to? And again, language and all these things facilitate this. But in this moment, are we able to come in and not just talk about the thing as if all these sort of prefabricated lenses aren't there? So it's a process of dismantling the lenses and being very explicit about that. Okay, we're actually going to take apart the pink elephant and we're all going to do it together. I would like this side of the room to take the trunk. I would like this side of the room to take the ass and the tail. This side of the room take the front legs, the hind legs, and so forth. As a way of going, oh, we're already coming in with this. So whatever we're going to talk about is already tainted with this. So it's a way for us to come together and say, listen, we're all actually holding the pink elephant. So what if we take a moment, take that pink elephant out, and then have a conversation very awkwardly as a first step. It's just the exercise of dropping. We're not even getting toward a goal. We're just learning to drop. And we're learning to drop. When I was learning the golf for the first time, I was learning the golf, and I remember putting was just a bitch for me. It was a bear. And I had an instructor say, you know what, Mark, you know what I noticed? You're 30 feet from the pin and you're putting and you're looking at 30 feet out toward the pin. You're looking at the hole. All I want you to do is look at the first few feet in front of you and just putt. Make an imaginary line right in front of you and just putt that to get the feel. And it's the feel that's going to take you to the hole. I don't want you to look at the hole. I just want you to look at the first few feet in front of you and do that. And it's that practice that guides the ball to the pin and to the hole. So if we can just practice spaces of just dropping, it's almost in some sense another way of an extended way of taking a moment of silence. Before we involve ourselves in serious conversations at social venue, we say, let's all have a moment of silence. There's something very aligning in that. What if we extended that moment and created just containers of that just for 5 minutes? Let's just talk about how we feel. There's none of this. None of that can come into the conversation. Or we have conversations where that can be a separate conversation. So we won't take people's drama triangle away from them, by God. We'll just have a different space for it. So we don't want to take that. We don't want to deprive you of your finger. It's just that we're going to have a different venue for the finger. And in this one, you have to put on the kimono and your hands are tied behind your back in the kimono and you can't use the fingers. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to expound on that in a different conversation, but I use all techniques in the moment to facilitate and sort of just get us out of the prefabricated lenses and conceptual frames and do that together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I love y'all. This is great conversation. I miss this shit. It's fantastic.
Well, we can do this anytime you want, brother.
This is great.
This is an ongoing party. Here in Longmont, there's a street called 100-Year Party. That's kind of what Integral feels like to me.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
100-Year Party.
I like 100-Year Party.
Yeah.
I like 100-Year Party.
Do you want to bring anybody else in, Mark?
I'll take. I've got room for one more question. So and all, thank you for being part of this. Let me just say that right now. This has been a beautiful conversation. I'm looking forward to looking at everyone's comments and thank you for your energy here. Thank you for coming to the party. This is beautiful. So I think we can take one more question before we conclude this party and till the next party.
Dan, did you have one in mind?
No, I didn't see anybody particularly. I'm just curious. It's funny. Julie and I were talking about Dante's The Divine Comedy. And basically, she says that the Paradiso is really just higher states of consciousness, just throwing one party after another.
I love that.
Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, she said the angels are their only job is to praise. All they do is praise, and the only thing that happens in paradise is throwing parties. So that's pretty beautiful.
Oh, someone says they did send a question. Let me see here. All right, here, let's make this the last question. Waleed, I think, maybe. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
I think so. I think so.
How do you feel about the need to deconstruct the word racist into several and more basic components, thus more informative rather than staining the subject? So I guess maybe is racism one of those pink elephants with a trunk and a tail and 4 feet? And
yeah, it's got a lot of energy behind it, doesn't it? You know, everybody starts sweating once you even say we're going to talk about racism. It's got a lot of you know, it's like that lion in Aladdin who disturbs my, you know, it has a lot of gravitas to it. Yeah, definitely a lot of baggage. You know, it's interesting. I've had conversations about race without using the word. Corey, you said something earlier, and my business partner and I talk about this all the time, is we go forth and we do a little bit of, you know, work with organizations to try to get their arms around social and societal challenges that are bleeding into the organization life. And he said something very compelling. And he said, you know, this all just feels like we just need empathy training. We need to all have a way of actually framing this up as empathy. And so one of the ways that I've talked about race without talking about race is just helping people understand sort of where they are from an empathetic response standpoint, and not making people feel bad about their own self-interest. Yeah. Accepting a level of self-interest and just saying, well, you know, I'm tired of people telling me I need to care about this, or, you know, I just feel like it's shoved down my throat and da, da, da. Well, let's talk about that. Yeah. But without actually using the word, just tell me how you feel. I just want to know how you feel. And you know what? Can you try something for me? Right. Let's not use racial stuff. Just tell me how you feel generally. Usually what I find is that people open up about their own stuff. And I think a lot of racial identity stuff is wrapped in with a lot of other stuff, a lot of, you know, pain body stuff that we inherited, you know, from society, from growing up and conditioning and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's Waleed. That's one way that I've done it. I do think it's possible to just not actually even break it out into constituent parts, but to experiment with not using the words in general.
That's a brilliant injunction, Mark, because it actually allows us to kind of deepen our sense of this, just the semiotics of a word like race or racism, a word that clearly is enacted in different ways by everyone who uses the word. So, which is one of the reasons why everyone is constantly talking across each other, and why this sort of mutuality and empathy is so hard to find in the first place. Yeah. We all assume that when you say the word race and racism, you mean exactly what I mean when I say those words. But it's a hyper object. We all enact them differently. So by actually avoiding using those particular words, you're forced to find other ways to express whatever it is you're trying to express. Exactly. And then that gives me access to what your semiotics really, really are, and where those pain points really, really are. And I can unfold with that.
That's right. That's right. Because this is part of the experimentation. Look, everyone else is already doing the define meaning and having the conceptual conversations, right? Those are the only conversations in town, right? You have nothing to lose by temporarily leaving your clothes at the door and putting on this kimono and trying something different. Again, that's why it's such a what do we have to lose invitation. And again, I'm always of the bias and opinion. Don't take my word for it. Come in and see how it feels. Try it on, right? I mean, we can negate and say, but some people are going to feel like this. Yeah. And then what? What do you want? Then what? Is it workable? Is it all workable? Let's find out. Right. Let's find out. So an attitude of let's find out is something different. That conversation isn't happening right now. It needs to happen. That's my position. I could be wrong. I don't give a shit. I think it needs to happen. So, so whoever is resonates with that, I happily invite to have that kind of conversation, because everyone else is having the other types of conversations, and I'm not saying they're not important. Once again, but a diversity of voices is going to make this thing move forward.
And methods and values. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm really taking away from the conversation just you're kind of stepping into territory that I don't kind of consider very much, but I consider the somatic part, but it's more about relaxation and listening and a quality of kind of deeply relaxing. But the celebrative part is what really has me thinking, you know, when you're framing how much goes on at a party, that like you're talking about the kind of truth that gets told and the creativity that emerges and the expression, and people take risks and they fail and they keep going and they don't leave. And, you know, so that's really kind of opened me up to think about that a lot more, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. This has just been fantastic. And Mark, just thank you so much, man. I have so much love and appreciation for you. And thank you for helping us actually role model what this new sort of series of conversations might look like, what they might feel like, how fun they can be, even as they are challenging. I mean, I feel like we spent more of these last 90 minutes laughing than anything else. And, you know, I hope that
mission accomplished.
Yes, seriously. And I hope that everyone who's watching us right now feels that and feels that invitation to be part of this space. This space is as much for you guys as it is for the four of us to sit here and talk with each other.
That's right.
And so thank you everyone for showing up, for such amazing questions as always. And for, you know, for those of you who, you know, felt a little bit vulnerable hopping onto camera and talking with us in real time, you are my heroes. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Me too.
And,
come on in, everybody. Let's make the experiment together. Let's keep building. Let's see what comes up. Let's find out.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Love to you all. Wow.
Love you, Mark.
Yep.
Take care.
Love
Bye,
you both.
guys.
Love
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Love you too. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you later. Hey, it was a party. The time flew by.
It really did.
All right.
Bye.